A Navy SEAL thought he was making a harmless joke when he stopped a quiet black woman in the hallway and mocked her rank. Soldiers laughed, the insult spread, and humiliation followed her through every corner of the base. But what none of them knew was that this woman carried a truth powerful enough to shake the entire chain of command. And when 4 generals suddenly walked in and saluted her, everything changed. Because the moment he mocked her was the moment he sealed his own fate. Comment and tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories. Colonel Amara Johnson arrived at the naval base with the calm precision of someone who had spent her entire career moving through places where every step mattered. To the outside world, she appeared to be just another visitor, an unfamiliar face blending into the rhythm of military routines. But beneath that quiet exterior lived a woman shaped by years of classified operations, global deployments, and decisions that had protected soldiers who would never know her name. For Amara, blending in was intentional. The assignment required silence, observation, and patience. Officially, she was there to review training procedures. Unofficially, she had been selected to investigate the growing signs of discrimination and abuse rising through the ranks, reports that had reached levels of authority far beyond this base. Her presence was not an accident. It was a mission years in the making. As she moved through the hallways, she studied everything: body language, interactions, the way authority shifted depending on who stood in the room. She had seen these patterns before in other facilities, small cracks in discipline that eventually grew into systems of humiliation and fear. But still, she kept her posture steady, keeping her true identity hidden behind a quiet, almost unnoticeable calm. The base felt different from others she had visited. There was tension lingering just beneath the surface, a sharpness in the air that suggested hostility disguised as routine. And even though no one yet knew who she really was, Amara sensed that the coming days would test her in ways even her dangerous missions overseas never had. What she didn't know, at least not yet, was how quickly this quiet assignment would turn into a storm. How one arrogant soldier would push a simple joke into a full-scale campaign of humiliation. And how every moment of that cruelty would become evidence in a case far bigger than anyone on that base could imagine. It didn't take long for Amara Johnson to become the center of unwanted attention. The moment Lieutenant Brian Carter noticed her walking alone through the hallway, something shifted. Her quiet presence, her composed posture, her silence, he mistook all of it as weakness. And in places where arrogance thrives, perceived weakness becomes a target. The first insult arrived wrapped in laughter. The SEAL team watched her the way predators observe an unfamiliar figure crossing into their territory, amused and curious about how far they could push her. Their sarcasm spread through the base like wildfire, echoing in cafeterias, corridors, and training fields. Each day brought a new layer of humiliation, small enough to be dismissed by those watching, but sharp enough to cut deep. Amara endured it with the discipline of someone who understood the value of patience. She did not react, did not flinch, did not give them the satisfaction of seeing pain. Instead, she observed, memorized, filed every moment into the mental archive she perfected during years of covert assignments. But the harassment escalated quickly. What began as quiet mockery became public taunts. The team followed her during meals, turning every entrance into a spectacle. They treated her competence as a joke, her presence as an inconvenience, and her silence as proof that she didn't belong. Each insult landed with the weight of a familiar history, one she had carried throughout her entire career. Yet she refused to let that history bend her. She continued her nightly walks across the base, reviewing each event with precision. Who laughed, who looked away, who contributed, who stayed silent out of fear. In those quiet moments, she steadied herself, reminding her mind and body that every injustice would one day become evidence. Then everything changed. During a morning exercise, Carter pushed boundaries further, creating a staged accident that sent her stumbling in front of dozens of soldiers. Their laughter stung, not because it surprised her, but because it confirmed exactly how deep the culture of cruelty had taken root. That moment was her turning point, not outwardly, not visibly, but internally. Something within her locked into place. By the 4th day, the hostility reached a level that threatened to expose the base's darkest flaws. Carter arranged another spectacle at lunch, ensuring the cafeteria was full when he approached her table. This time, a spilled drink became the weapon. Liquid splashed across her uniform, followed by exaggerated amusement. The room erupted with laughter, unaware that every second was being etched into a timeline far more consequential than they could ever imagine. But for the first time, Amara did not walk away. She stayed seated, composed, her expression unreadable. Her restrained calm unsettled Carter more than he cared to admit. Something about her silence carried authority, an authority he had been too arrogant to recognize. And while the soldiers continued laughing, she quietly studied every face, marking the moment when their cruelty crossed from casual mockery to deliberate abuse. That night she opened her secured system and reviewed the evidence she had been gathering. Images, timestamps, behavioral logs, patterns of harassment not just toward her but toward others who lacked the power to fight back. What she uncovered confirmed a truth she had suspected all along. This wasn't an isolated problem. It was structural, embedded, widespread. Her mission was no longer just an assessment. It was becoming the foundation for a case that would shake military institutions across the country. But the rising storm was far from over. Carter grew more emboldened, convinced he still had the upper hand. He planned something bigger, something public, something he believed would finally break her composure. What he didn't realize was that every step he took was carrying him closer to a downfall already set in motion, one he was walking into with his eyes wide open. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and the entire base would soon witness it. The final breaking point arrived on a day that looked ordinary to everyone except Amara Johnson. The base moved through its routines with the familiar rhythm of drills, briefings, and orders. But beneath that surface, something was shifting, an uneasiness in the air, a quiet alertness in Amara's steps. She knew the storm was coming. She had seen patterns like this unfold before. Arrogance gaining momentum, cruelty reaching a final desperate peak before collapsing under its own weight. Lieutenant Brian Carter had spent the week testing every boundary he could imagine. Now he wanted an audience. The morning ceremony was packed with soldiers, visitors, and dignitaries. It was the perfect stage for the humiliation he planned, the kind he believed would cement his dominance once and for all. He positioned Amara where every eye could see her, convinced that a final display of belittlement would erase whatever fragments of dignity she had left. But something unexpected began to ripple through the crowd. Officers whispered to each other, noticing details they had ignored before. The precision of her posture, the controlled strength in her movements, the familiarity of protocols she executed with flawless ease. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who had spent years commanding in places far beyond this base. Yet Carter, blinded by arrogance, saw none of it. As he pushed forward with his planned spectacle, the atmosphere shifted. A silence rolled across the formation as several high-ranking officers arrived, men and women whose presence alone altered the gravity of the room. And then, in a moment that froze every person present, 4 generals stepped into view. Their eyes moved past Carter as if he were invisible, locking directly onto Amara. Without hesitation, they raised their hands in a formal salute, a salute reserved for someone of exceptional rank, someone whose authority reached the highest levels of military command. The entire base watched in stunned disbelief. Soldiers who had laughed at her days earlier now struggled to process what they were seeing. The woman they had mocked, doubted, and dismissed stood before them as someone far greater than they ever imagined. Their reactions shifted, from amusement to confusion and finally to fear. Carter felt the ground shift beneath him. Each second stretched, sharpening the reality that had been hidden from him all along. This was no lost visitor, no harmless target. This was a superior officer whose entire silence had been part of a mission he never understood. And for the first time, he felt the weight of everything he had done. The slurs, the humiliation, the orchestrated cruelty. Not like a rumor or a joke, but as a chain tightening around his career. The general's salute wasn't just a gesture. It was a revelation, a turning point, a signal that the truth was no longer hidden. And as the stunned crowd looked on, one question echoed through the air like a thunderclap. What would happen now that her true identity, and his deepest failure, had been exposed to everyone? When the general's salute echoed through the hall, the atmosphere of the entire base transformed. The quiet woman so many soldiers had dismissed stood, revealed as a leader whose authority reached far beyond their understanding. For Amara Johnson, the moment was not about pride. It was about truth finally stepping into the light. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of every insult she had endured and every witness who had stayed quiet out of fear. What happened next reshaped the base. Investigations unfolded, exposing not only Brian Carter's behavior but the deeper patterns of discrimination that had taken root long before she arrived. Those who had participated in the humiliation, whether through action or silence, were held accountable. And for the first time, many soldiers saw how easily cruelty could hide behind jokes, how quickly a culture can turn against someone who simply looks different. Amara's report sparked reforms across multiple installations, opening new channels for soldiers to speak without fear. Her work became a catalyst for change that extended far beyond the walls of that cafeteria. Letters from young service members began to reach her, stories of courage, stories of standing up, stories of refusing to accept abuse as part of the uniform they wore. But the impact wasn't limited to the military. Her story became a reminder of a truth America still struggles with. Racism does not need a battlefield to inflict damage. It grows quietly, through assumptions, through humiliation, through systems that reward the powerful and silence the vulnerable. And yet, every cycle of injustice carries within it the possibility of transformation, if someone is willing to confront it. Amara did more than expose one man's cruelty. She forced an entire institution to face itself. And in doing so, she proved that dignity, once reclaimed, has the power to shake even the strongest walls of oppression. Her story asks a question we cannot ignore. If one woman's courage can spark change across a system this large, what could happen if all of us chose to confront injustice wherever we see it? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And make sure you subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and the fight to be seen.